But Alex, I think we got a Heatblur interview to do. You got Tomcat stuff to talk about.
We got Tomcat stuff to talk about. We have Cobra here and we have Swither. We introduced both of them. Cobra is the lead artist for the Tomcat, so all that amazing artwork you've seen in the reveal trailer, that's Cobra behind it and his team of artists, and then all the crazy flying and great flight model impressions and what you got so far, a little bit from the outside at least. That's Swither and much more, of course, both of them. Maybe we can start today with a little thing that caught a bit traction in the community, as I've seen. Some people were not aware of the fact that we're making jet wash. How's that going to be, Swither?
Yeah, so basically what we've done is implement both wake turbulence and jet wash. It's still work in progress, of course, but especially for the A Tomcat, you will definitely need to watch out for the jet wash from other aircraft and avoid stalling your TF-30s. Those are really prone to stalling if you manhandle the throttles too much and you get into other planes jet wash and so on. I mean, everyone's seen Top Gun, right? So that's exactly what happened there.
As for feedback goes, I mean, how do you feel that in the cockpit? Is that like audible or visible, or how does feedback in the Tomcat work in that sense?
So if you get into another airplane's wake turbulence or jet wash, you will get a lot of buffet, of course, and you will also notice that if you get your wingtip into the wake turbulence, it will either pop up or pop down, basically depending on which side you're on or depending on which if it's counterclockwise or clockwise wake turbulence. So that will definitely add some challenges to the air-to-air refueling and so on.
Very interesting. Is that kind of feedback in place in other places as well in the Tomcat, like when you're pulling high Gs or high AOA, when you're approaching the carrier, stuff like, do you get rattling of the cockpit or similar stuff? I mean, can you fly
User
it
was moved out of your channel
by learning the aircraft in that sense?
Yeah, I think, one of the main...
User was moved out of your channel.
This is obviously a leading question, right? But one of the main inputs we've gotten from our subject matter experts, our Tomcat pilots, has been that the Tomcat was really an airplane that you could learn how to fly based on the buffeting you experienced and the shaking of the airplane and so on while doing tight turns and so on. So if you're doing that dogfight, you just really take notice to the buffeting that's happening, or if your flaps out, you will notice the buffeting. If you're in the transonic region, you will notice buffeting, etc. So just learn to listen to the airplane, and it will make you a much better pilot.
Very nice. Guys, if you feel like you have questions in the chat, then feel free to ask us. We will try to pick as many as we can without stretching this for too long, but feel free to ask and we might spot one of the other Cobra. I think it was quite a great moment when the reveal of the Tomcat to the community happened. It was the first time that people saw your artwork. How did that feel?
Nervous. It was pretty cool. We've been working on this thing for a pretty long time now, and it was very enjoyable to show it off to the community for the first time. Obviously, the real litmus test is when people actually get to jump into the cockpit themselves and they see it up close, because everything you see right now is curated to avoid showing any bugs or pitfalls. So we have a lot of hard work ahead to make sure that we get you that experience that we've now hyped up for you.
What are the next steps in the art department? You want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah, sure. Right now we're working on finishing up and migrating in the new Rio cockpit. We're also concurrently working on things like damage modeling, more liveries, and just fixing a lot of inconsistencies, bugs. We're doing a lot of optimization work right now, night lighting. There's a lot of bits and pieces that need to come into place, and all of these add up. So the team is hard at work, and the Tomcat has 5 artists on it right now. So we've got quite some hands in the mix, so to speak.
Very nice, very exciting. I mean, from what we've seen from the artwork, and you know, some of us closer than others maybe, but what has been revealed so far, I think, has been completely blowing people away, and it's just been like, you know, from a Heatblur's point of view, I think for all of us, it was just, you know, amazing and overwhelming just to see how people connected to that aircraft like almost instantly. And I really hope that people will feel that when they fly it as well. Molta, do you have some questions maybe, or Billy?
I don't really have any questions. I think the best line here would just be to take the questions from the chat and what they have coming, because I think they've got some stuff. One of the biggest ones that I keep rehearing, and I don't know that Cobra or whether you guys are going to have any mention of this, is there any talk of a online or offline manual that's going to come out before the actual module debuts?
Yeah, I mean, we're not exactly sure when it's going to come out. It might actually just be on launch day, but we're hoping to have it out before we go into early access. You know, like everything we do, we have a minimum level of quality that we need to attain before we feel comfortable in putting anything out there. And as soon as we are at that point with the manual, we'll look at releasing it. So hopefully before release. Fingers crossed. No promises right now, but definitely for early access release.
So one question was, what features does the dual user module have? And I think they mean the crew pack. So just to throw that out there, guys, so we can make a little bit of advertisement here as well. You can, from the Heatblur store, buy 3 different packs with a Tomcat. And the keys are all the same basically. So you don't get a different Tomcat in a different pack, but what you get is a single edition where you simply buy a Tomcat key. Then you have a edition with a limited edition T-shirt. From our cool Tomcat t-shirts. You can buy these also separately. And then you have a crew pack, which basically is just an incentive for you to fly with a friend, to buy a gift for somebody, and you get 2 keys that work completely independently from each other, but for a slightly more reduced price. So that is the crew pack, and in that sense, it's not different from any other Tomcat other than that you get 2.
Sorry to jump in. I saw a couple of interesting questions here. One was whether we're optimizing the F-14 for VR, and actually most of us, I think at this point, fly in VR, or at least half. So making sure that VR performance is really good is really important to us. So we are definitely keeping that in mind as much as possible. Though the F-14, we are trying to push the bar a little bit, so we do expect it to be heavier on your hardware than existing aircraft, or at least on the same level as the heaviest ones. So keep that in mind as well. But again, most of us fly in VR, so we really want that experience to be smooth. If not for you guys, then for ourselves as well. The other question was whether we've run a really big multiplayer session yet with a lot of Tomcats, and I think we've theoretically, when we filmed the trailer, I guess you could call that a stress test of sorts. We had, I think, up to 100 AI aircraft at that point, and something like 15 Tomcats in the air. So we've sort of done it so far, and we're planning to do that more in the future as well.
Swither, there was a question, what about experimental weapons on the A version? I think they mean probably the Iranian version. Are there any plans to implement these?
So basically we haven't decided made any final decisions yet, but I think like if there's proof that they actually flew with those weapons and they worked, yeah, I think we'll do them. They won't be there for our early access release, obviously, since the first release will only be the B version and the Iranians have the A version. But when we have when we're getting to that point, I guess we'll evaluate what seems feasible or not. I mean, there's many different rumors about the Iranians testing different weapons, and I think some of them have some credibility, whilst some don't. So, yeah, maybe you, Nick, have something to add there.
No, just on the purely visual side, we will be adding the earlier MBU, I think it's 7 type mask, which the Iranians use, and we'll be removing the television camera system, chin pod, and replacing it with the earlier IR sensor. So those visual changes will be made for sure, but in terms of weapons, it's like Swither said, we haven't really made any decisions, and figuring out what's myth and what's actually in use is quite difficult. So we'll see what happens.
There was another great question maybe for you, Swither, is how smart is Jester?
So basically, I mean, so at initial launch, he will be perfectly capable of handling a lot of different situations, but he will be far from the state that we will want him to be in when we're done. So my belief is that in order to make him feel real, we need to add so many different small things that he can do, and it's just a matter of really, writing the code for all of these small things and throwing them in there in a sense, and to get that real feeling. But at the moment, I mean, you can definitely fly it alone, and he will be really useful. He will help you spot targets. He will lock up targets for you. He will, he will be really useful. Basically, but in terms of how smart he is, I don't know how would you even measure that for something like this. It's a bit difficult, I think.
I think in a way you said he's as smart as you are, since you kind of have to code his behavior. So maybe that's the limit there, but I think
he will never
there's
be smarter
some good
than me,
leeway.
but,
I think there's some good leeway, but in my opinion, Jester is very smart in those areas where he's programmed to function. So he's not like a smart AI that's gonna learn something outside of the field of tasks that are meant for him to master. He's not like a self-learning AI or core AI in that sense. But I think he has a very smart laid out system in order to provide you not only the needed support from your Rio, but also to provide it in a way that you can fly and manage Jester at the same time. I think that's a very important point about his smartness.
Yeah, and I think one of the main advantages of the Tomcat is that you have a double crew in it, because you having that extra set of eyes makes a huge difference in a dogfight situation where you have multiple aircrafts in the air and so on. So I think it's important that Jester also provides that, and I think he does. It's but don't expect him to be perfect from the start. It's definitely something we intend to improve over time, and from the start he will be fairly basic.
I think another question connected to Jester, and to bring it back to the arts department, Cobra, something that got people pretty stoked were the movements of the pilot and the Rio in the back, and how that works and how that's gonna look and so on. I mean, maybe you can shed some light on that. For example, if I fly as the Rio and the pilot looks to the left, do I see that, and how elaborate is that going to be? I think we've seen in the review stream, and everybody will agree, that it's already way more elaborate than what is in DCS already, so maybe you can shed some light there.
Well, the core of Jester is what we call a human simulation model. So we simulate where Jester actually looks, and that includes if he needs to look down at an instrument or a switch in order to flip it or read its values or something. So since that was the core of Jester and the very base of it, we were able to extend that naturally and drive the movements of the actual visual part, so the actual Rio model in the back back seat. So that's sort of like a bonus of doing it accurately that we didn't entirely predict from the start, perhaps, but it worked out really well. In terms of multiplayer, we're syncing your head movements both in the cockpit and outside of the cockpit. So if you're flying with a friend and you're sitting in the back seat and your buddy's looking left or looking right, you're going to see his head movements, and that's pretty cool. It gives a bit of a communal feel in there, I guess. We hope to add more animations to the pilots as we go along. Unfortunately, DCS, while it does support skeletal animation, it does not support things like animation blending or inverse kinematics. So it's a bit tricky to do anything overly complex, and we also have to make sure to return to the base pose before we go into a different animation. So it's a little bit limited in that sense, and don't expect too much there, but we're hoping to add as much life as we can because it really adds to the immersion. So we're doing as much as we can there.
Will Jester cheat in order to be competitive with other players or be able to work correctly? And I think Cobra answered part of that question already, in the sense that he's modeled like a human, so you know he's not going to see through the bottom of the aircraft, or will he, Swither?
Yeah, so like Nick mentioned, like the core of Jester is really what we call the Jester human model, and that's like what we try to do there is really replicate what a human would do, what a human would see, etc. So I don't think he's cheating, but I mean, obviously that's he shouldn't know stuff that you wouldn't be able to know yourself, or really would be able to know. And I think in many ways a good human Rio will be a lot better than Jester, but Jester will be a lot better than someone who's just never who haven't practiced being a Rio. So no, I don't think he's cheating.
Yeah, well, that's just being more experienced in a way, more, in a way, Jester had more time to spend with a Tomcat to learn the stuff, what he can, but people will catch up to that, in my opinion.
Yeah. So, unfortunately, I need to run, but I guess Nick will be able to stay a little bit longer. We have a test session set up with our Tomcat testers, so I need to get to orchestrating that.
So talking about, and I'm kind of a novice when it comes to the F-14, but does the AIM-54 need cooling? Does the Seeker need cooling? And if it does, is that modeled?
Good question. I can't remember. No, I don't think it does. It doesn't. I don't think so. No.
Okay.
No,
well,
it doesn't.
That answers that question.
Gyrovag might spank me for that answer if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure no.
Well, you're talking to somebody that's really ignorant on this stuff. I just saw it mentioned in the chat not too long ago. Another question that I remember seeing was, is stress for the airframe modeled? Like, will stress imparted on the airframe affect handling, affect really anything with the Tomcat itself?
Yeah, that's something we actually been working on this past week. And if you overstress the aircraft, mostly we do simulate, or we do try to keep it to just catastrophic type damage. So you'll rip off wings and stuff like this. But it does build up, so we do have a model where it's not just instantaneous or anything like that. But if you do mistreat your airframe repeatedly, or once in an extreme matter, of course, you will end up with catastrophic damage.
Do you guys have anything else? That's all I can remember as far as...
No, but somebody just corrected us on the fact that the AIM-54 indeed needs cooling for the electronics, as it seems. But this is really a question. If somebody really wants to know, put it up on...
I'm not the authority on our systems modeling, unfortunately, right now. So as much time as some of us spend developing the aircraft, we don't have much time to fly it or actually learn it. So that's a bit of irony there for you, but that's the way it is.
That's kind of how I feel with the SATAL stream. I thought I'd have more time to fly on my weekends, and I don't, because I'm always doing this.
Yeah.
So I feel your guys' pain, though it's not quite on that level. So is there anything else while we wrap this up? We got 30 seconds for this particular giveaway.
There's a question here on the dynamic cockpit system. So the dynamic cockpit system, it's going to basically you're going to see different parts appear in the cockpit depending on the airframe you're actually sitting in. The panels are going to move around, so just like in the real aircraft, the panels weren't always in the same location. So we try and simulate that and make you identify the panels by the way they look and the controls on them rather than just rote memorization, if you will. There's going to be stuff like different cushions, different weathering patterns and stuff like that. So hopefully we end up with a system where it feels pretty unique every time you're in the aircraft. I think there's only been one from Ghost. Will we see more videos from the F-14 during the waiting for the startup? Yeah, yes, you will. We're working on quite a few. Unfortunately, in a small company like this, you have to wear a lot of hats, and my hands are quite tied with actually developing the aircraft. So it's slow going to produce new content, but we're getting there. So expect to see a lot more stuff moving forward, and we're going to do in-depth dives on the aircraft and how it works and so on.
Well, real quick, one thing that I can think of, and you guys have probably already touched on this in the past, not necessarily this stream, but the Intruder. So you guys had that Intruder video with the A6 AI. What's the deal with that? When's it coming? Is it something that's going to launch with the Tomcat? I know a ton of people have high hopes that people are just going to say, oh, we're going to make it. And I know you kind of hinted at that, saying you were going to make it as a player-controlled module. But what's the deal with the Intruder?
Yeah, so I'm not sure. It's probably not going to come out with the F-14. It's going to come a bit further down the line, and we consider it to be part of the same push as the Forrestal class carriers, of course, and the A6 is a part of that. Just basically all the content around the F-14 that we're trying to create and trying to give everybody as much value for their money as we possibly can, because you guys are paying $70, $80, so we want to make sure that you guys get a full, rich experience. So
what you're saying what you're saying is we're going to get the Intruder for free.
Well, the AI Intruder is free, yes, absolutely. It goes into base DCS World, so it's free for everybody in DCS World. Same with the carriers, same for, we have some more unannounced stuff for the F-14 that's going to go in, and it's also going to be free. So excited to get that in there. As for it being a flyable aircraft module in the future, that's definitely something that we'd like to do. We've got stuff we need to do before that, but obviously we've invested some time and energy into creating it and getting it to this point, so it is a long-term goal of ours.
I can think of many people that would be very excited to have the bomb truck that is the A6 Intruder as a flyable module in DCS, and I think it would complement the carrier-borne aircraft like the F-14 and the F-18 really, really well. As ugly as it is, I mean, it's pretty in my heart, but as ugly as it is, I think it would be a really well-received module in the DCS community. So, in saying that...
Ugly, Malta.
There's a question here about how you tell Jester to operate the Lantirn. And that's an area that's heavily work in progress right now. It's a bit of a design conundrum, if you will, because it's pretty difficult to design a set of commands that will allow you to easily direct Jester to use Lantirn, but we think we're on the right path. But this might be an area where Jester is not fully functional on early access release. We'll see, but essentially the most logical commands that you can think of will be there, like look in that direction, or look where I'm looking right now, and this type of stuff. So hopefully we get that working in a good way.
There were two other great questions. Nick Jabbers asked a time ago, if you are at low speed and you bank, do you get adverse roll?
I believe it's at high angles of attack you get reverse roll, and at high angles of attack, actually using the rudders is the preferred method to roll the aircraft in the F-14. I think, if I remember correctly. Again, I'm not the most knowledgeable person on actually flying the aircraft, but that's what I remember. And of course that's simulated to its fullest extent, and it's been something that for the flight model in general, our subject matter experts have been really a core and integral part of making sure that the aircraft flies the way it should. Actually, one of our F-14, former F-14 pilots has over 100 hours on the aircraft at this point, so there's been a lot of back and forth and tweaking and fixing, so the flight model really is the core pillar of the whole module, even though you might see the overt stuff more, like the graphics and the artwork and stuff like that, but the flight model really is the very foundation of everything else.
It is really an amazing experience. I mean, if you one of the places where you can see it as well is when you do Adversial. We tested that a couple of days ago, and it's just so nice how the wing creates more draft and it gets pushed back, and the other wing gets pushed forward, and the whole effect just decreases. I think like it's really a different experience in between the Tomcat and stuff that's out there.
Oh, sorry, you said Adversial. I'm sorry, I understood roll reversal for some reason. I think Jabber's asked about roll reversal as well before.
Yeah, he was. I moved on to Adversial basically in the next. Because we were just testing that, and it was just an amazing experience. You know how real that feels.